You are listening to the Overfunctioning Leadership Podcast, learning leadership concepts through life experience. Well, welcome, friends, to another Overfunctioning Leadership Podcast. I'm Alex.
I'm John.
And I'm Zach.
And we are pumped to talk to you today about perfectionism, and specifically, how does perfectionism affect leadership? Lots of thoughts there. Actually, somebody emailed us this question overall to get us into this topic. And so, once again, if you would like to send an email to us, anything, it is theofpodcast@gmail.com. Also on Facebook and YouTube, I guess you could.
I think we are on YouTube. If you Google the Overfunctioning Podcast, the top two results should be the YouTube and our Facebook group on the Facebook.
Got it. Now, it's the Overfunctioning Leadership Podcast.
Yes, we have just
to be very clear.
Yeah.
Things have changed a little bit. So, anyways, a couple things happened, though, since the last time we met. And one was we recorded a session about sabotage. So, John, in a couple milliseconds here, how about you tell us what we talked about when it came to sabotage, and what is it?
Yeah, we talked about systems get stuck. They are used to operating a certain way, and we mentioned that when a leader makes a decision to do something different in a system, that especially the least mature or the least differentiated tend to be the most inflexible, and a leader is likely to experience some type of sabotage or resistance. In the professional workplace, it can look a little bit different than it does in a family where the 7-year-old's running around sabotaging things. That can be pretty overt. But oftentimes in a professional setting, the sabotage is a little bit more covert. It looks like nodding yes to an initiative and having no intention of carrying it out, things like that. So leaders who work on defining self and trying to lead their organization, whatever it is, to a higher level of functioning are likely to experience pushback and resistance of some type.
Yeah, so whether it is a child on its back, screaming and crying in the middle of Target, or somebody nodding yes, it is still sabotage nonetheless, to a point to where you've made a change, and I am not good with that, and how dare you? We're changing back.
And the irony is we're not just sabotaging those that are doing poorly, right? We're not trying to remove the bad, right? We're removing the good too because they've changed something, right? And we do it often without even knowing. It's typically a non-conscious decision to sabotage someone.
Yeah.
You know, when I say yes to something that you're telling me to do and I have no intention of doing it, I'm not consciously thinking I'm not going to do it. I'm thinking, if I get the time and I'll come up with excuses or something, but ultimately that's sabotage.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that non-conscious response and helps leaders take things less personal.
Yeah, cool. And so that was sabotage. If you like to hear the word sabotage said over and over again, and specifically in the form of saboteurs, we actually tried to find different words for it, but they're all pretty ridiculous. So good luck with that one, trying to find a different one. So that was our last Overfunctioning Leadership Podcast. And then I actually had an interview with Stacy Utek, my good friend Stacy Utek, and she was been an RD at Malone University or resident director, at Malone University for 9 years. And so she's done a lot of different leadership with student groups. And so she had a different perspective from that end. And also I appreciated at the beginning of our chat, she gave a little bit of history behind different leadership styles and how we've come to where we're at today. So really helpful and interesting and just different from the other chat sessions we've had so far.
Very interesting that she's been in that position for so long. Did you say 9 years?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a while to be in one position.
Yeah. So it's kind of, in some ways, I imagine it's probably similar to like teaching in some ways, just because, I'm not saying you're doing the exact same thing all the time, but you are having a similar techniques throughout, right? But then your clientele will change every year. So that's what makes teaching a little bit interesting, because if you don't like your kids, or there's also if you like your kids, then they're going to go away. So you just deal with different things, and you get different systems and different people all the time, which is always interesting. So, other than that, that's what was happening here. So that's going to actually lead us right into our fables section, and we thought it would be a good idea to go ahead and talk about Las Vegas and what has been going on there this past week. And so, Zach, could you give us a little bit of details of what happened in Las Vegas?
Yeah, so just to paint the picture for now and any future listeners, who may not have it fresh on their mind, we have a shooting that happened just the other day, and there were 50 plus victims that were killed, 400 plus victims that were injured, and this was a man at a casino who went up into his room with 10, 20, some large number of guns, and from his window shot at a concert of, I believe, was it 51,000, 21,000, 2,100? That's a wide variety, but there
thousands
were
of people.
Thousands
Yes.
of people
We'll
there.
go with that.
Very hectic and caused chaos. And the question right now is, since it's so fresh, motives haven't really been released. There's talk of whether or not it's terrorism, but regardless, it's created an anxious system.
Well, and and it's not even created an anxious system. It's bored out of an anxious system from this gentleman himself. And so because I think the overall, when bad things happen, right, there's the first question that I always seem to hear is why.
Yeah.
And so, but there's more going on in the background. So, John, maybe you could talk about that a little bit when it comes to, when people ask why. We don't have the answer to that, right? But we do, through systems, have some sort of understanding maybe of what's at play. So, John, what would you say about that?
Yeah, and as a teacher in the social studies area, this is an area that you talk about because it gets into gun control, it gets into the idea of mental health and how governments can respond to citizens. The protection of citizens is a fundamental responsibility of governments throughout time and throughout geography as well. So it hits on a lot of the fundamental missions of government, but there's just a lot of uncertainty and unknowns here. And I do know systems, at least I study it some, and I do know that anxious systems tend to feel more and think less. And oftentimes, if we operate our lives from a thinking perspective, we tend to make more thoughtful choices. But when anxiety is higher, it's harder to think that way, and we might respond from feelings. But I don't pretend to know what went through the gentleman's mind. There's the person was crazy, had mental illness.
Yeah.
People that won't, for me personally, I do not have those conversations simply because I simply don't know. And people can speculate if they want. But what I do know is that we all are part of a system, a country, a family, and we can look at our own functioning and try to mature the system that we're part of. And there's a lot of unknowns to that situation for sure. And I don't pretend to have answers to many of them.
These are and I know you have a quote here. These are, and I can't remember who it was. I'm sure, John, you could tell me. These are the unknown unknowns.
That would be Bernie Kosar, I think. I have no idea who said that.
It was, I wish I could remember who it was. But anyways, yeah, he was talking about, have you heard this quote? Do you know what I'm talking about?
No,
So
I have no
it's
idea.
kind of like it was, I'll look it up in the meantime while Zach's pulling up his stuff here. He's got a quote from Jason Aldean about the concert and everything that happened there. But basically the premise was that there are known knowns, and then there's known unknowns, and then there's unknown unknowns. And so how can you know, you know what I mean? You can't know things that are unknown that you have no idea what's going on. So so it's, and like when this politician said it, everybody was like, well, duh. But then it made sense, and you kind of get made fun of for it. But it was like, how can we can't know, how, if it's unknown to me and it's unknown to somebody, how am I even going to be able to, we can't predict everything all the time. And so, yeah.
Yeah, and you see that a lot with another symptom of an anxious society is hurting, right? You all come together around a conscious opinion, and then there's another one where you're blaming, right? You're finding someone to blame, and we
Right.
see that with the NRA and guns and
Sure.
just dealing with that. And you look at this quote, and I'm not quite sure what this corporate identity that he talks about is, but it definitely is indicative of where our society is at. He says, "The world is becoming the kind of place I am afraid to raise my children in. We aren't Democrats or Republicans, whites or blacks, men or women. We are all humans and we are all Americans, and it is time to start acting like it and stand together as one. Time to come together and stop the hate." And those are, I think, 3 separate quotes taken from a statement that this
Sure.
article just puts all together. But you have this indication of society you're afraid to raise your children in, and then he goes on to unite us together as humanity against the hate, which I think is interesting because I haven't heard of of a cause yet. The why hasn't even really been presented. It's only been speculated, and so I find that interesting.
Yeah. And I mean, yeah, it's like, how do you put a cause out there? What does that look like? What are the first steps you take to get rid of hate? That's a adaptive problem, and to throw out a technical solution to that is most likely not going to work, and from what we've known. So when we talk about technical is like setting laws or putting this in place, little different things along the lines, laws, regulations, those types of things. And adaptive things are going to be like changing people. Like, people are changing their psychological, how they feel. Society as a whole is going to change in some way. So from a non-anxious system, what we're talking about with systems, that's what we're talking about when it comes to here. To close this out, it was Donald Rumsfeld, by the way, who said this. So I'll read this quote, and we're getting quote crazy here. Sorry about that. But I think this will wrap up kind of what we're talking about when it comes to Las Vegas. Reports that say that something hasn't happened are always interesting to me, because as we know, there are known knowns. There are things that we know we know. We also know there are known unknowns. That is to say, we know that there are some things we do not know, but there are also unknown unknowns, the ones we don't know we don't know. And if one looks throughout the history of our country and other free countries, it is the later category that tend to be the difficult ones. And so that's what we're talking about here. Yeah. This is it. This is the unknown. How can we know what he was thinking, or how can we know what was going on there? We don't know. And to try to figure that all out is very difficult, and we don't have an answer for that. And so we are somber at what happened, and I know personally I'm praying, and I'm sure you guys are as well, for those people, and we encourage other people to do the same. But I think that pretty much wraps up what was going on with Las Vegas.
I think
unless
that
you have
pretty
another
much,
thought.
yeah.
Okay, well, we're going to transition out of that then, and we're going to go into perfectionism. And this was brought upon us by actually an ex-student of mine, a student who graduated. How about that? It sounds like I kicked him out or something. So the question that this person asked, actually, there were 2 of them. And one was, performance in college classes and jobs can be seen as an end-all, be-all. So with that in mind, how can one reduce anxiety in these situations? That's one. So if college and success is an end-all, be-all, how can we reduce anxiety in those situations? And 2, how can one manage the pressure to perform with their values and goals? So there's a lot there. And so how about we just stick with the first one, guys? And when it comes to how can one reduce anxiety when there's like a success component to it? And so what thoughts do you have on that?
So the thing that immediately jumps to mind is perfectionism, right? When you think of perfectionism, you think of I have never been one to gravitate towards perfectionism per se. I'm definitely the lazy procrastinator, a different P word, but some say that also comes from perfectionism, in that if you can't produce a perfect product,
Yeah.
Why produce anything at all? And then there's the other end where you're producing something and you only want it to be perfect. Both of those, I think, come from a place of fear, right?
Okay.
Where you're looking at that, and I know at least with me, it's the whole idea of what if what I produce and I put all this time and this energy into doesn't end up being of the level of quality that my level of effort should indicate. And so then you end up with this idea of failure, which is iconically in our A, B, C, D, F society and grading system.
Yeah.
Bad, right? You don't want an F. You don't want a D. A C is C's get degrees, and then you go up from there.
So wait. So from what I'm hearing, just so I can recap, kind of think about what you were saying. You were saying for you, it's more along the lines of my effort. I want my effort to match my output.
Right. And so when I'm not when I'm not confident in my ability to produce something that's related to the level of effort I put in. If I put in a lot of effort and I think I'm going to fail, that's going to feel embarrassing. That's going to feel like I'm less than I failed. And so I'm going to put in the level of effort that I feel is going to correspond with what I'm going to receive. I got C's in college and some higher grades, but I ended with a solid 3.0, just under actually. But I did that because I perfectly balanced this low level of effort and results, right? I was very, very efficient. It was very clean. But I definitely could have tried harder, and I didn't because I didn't want to deal with that idea of like what happens if I feel like I failed compared to the level of time I put in.
There's like a little homeostasis going on there. We're just like, well, this is my, in some ways, it's like my least amount of effort to get, what I need to get to. And you got your degree and you got a job.
Yeah. And
congratulations.
Very little stress comparatively. Yeah. Thank you. 2 years too late, but that's all right.
Now, the question I think here is, did you get a C-level job?
Oh, let me tell you.
Or I guess a 3.0. Is that a B minus?
A 3.0, I think, is a flat-out B.
Okay.
Right? Mm-hmm. But I don't know. I can't say being on the air. It's definitely an A+ job now that I'm thinking about it,
You know who butters your bread.
I know who butters my bread.
I know.
And provides the pickles.
Well, perfectionism, the pursuit of it, you mentioned in your talk there, Zach, your words that I think there's a fear of what if, that there's this striving towards, getting the internship or getting the scholarship, because if I don't, what if? So chronic anxiety is about that what if factor. And that desire for certainty is designed, I think, to alleviate that chronic anxiety. But the interesting part is, what is the cost to pursue that certainty? So perhaps in the podcast previous to this, we've mentioned the neuroscience research by David Rock, and he uses the SCARF model, something that we all desire. We desire status, certainty, autonomy, relatedness, and fairness. So I was thinking about this when we got the email about this pursuit of certainty, which is really the desire for perfection, and so I can be certain. And I was thinking just simply about, take those 5 letters: status, certainty, autonomy, relatedness, and fairness. If I pursue status at all costs, if I'm going to sacrifice the other 4 letters to get status, then I'm going to be a pretty miserable person. I'm going to put myself above others. I'm going to see how many friends I can have on, I don't know, MySpace, whatever, if that still exists. Anyways.
You're the only person I know who talks about MySpace.
Yeah, I'm going back to my heydays. But so I'm going to pursue that without question. Or let's take relatedness, that I'm going to pursue friendships and relationships with people at all costs. That just gets way out of whack. And I think this idea of certainty, if I'm going to pursue perfectionism, what I'm really doing is desiring certainty. And the question is, what am I sacrificing with status, with fairness, with relatedness, and with autonomy? And I think autonomy piece is something that's sacrificed because I feel like I don't have any control. I must pursue this. And the idea of backing off and being balanced is something that is very, very frightening.
Now, is the certainty guaranteed?
I'll let our listeners process that and answer that for themselves.
Yeah, because I just wonder, so you go into, okay, and I got this from Friedman, and I think there's a correlation here. So he was talking about people who might have cancer, somebody who has cancer, and they say, okay, within 4 years, you're in remission, and it's going to be gone in 4 years. Okay, and I think you can kind of correlate this to, okay, in 4 years, I'm going to graduate from college. If I do this, that, and the other, and these certain, that's almost a certainty in some case, but it's eliminated. There's zero emotional level to that. So like what's going on the emotional side, that's all rational. This is what's going to happen. So if I can keep myself, I feel like sometimes perfectionism, and I don't know, this is just a thought, is that trying to keep everything in the rational world, the technical world. If I do this, and this, then I'm going to get this reward on the end. But that has no part and parcel of any emotion of what's going on, emotional level of what's going on in my life. And so when I think about like this certainty piece, this is going to be certain, I question that because you don't know what's happening with that person at that point in time. So within 4 years, I'm going to graduate, and then I'm going to get a job at a blah, blah, blah. And then, Then I'm going to get married, and I'm going to have this, and blah, 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 blah. That stuff that's there, you don't know what's going on. You don't know what's going to happen in your life. Now, I'm not saying that you're preparing for those things. And this is a societal thing, right? Right now, you got to go to college, and, John, you and I are reading a book right now called The Happiness Advantage. The Happiness Advantage by Sean Archer. At least I think that's how you say his name. Achor? I don't know. Anyways, and his whole thing too is about how we're driven by this perfectionism, societal, like if I get the success, and then I'll be happy. And it's almost like it eliminates this whole emotional realm of happiness and what the heck else is going on and just climbing this ladder. And I don't know. What do you guys think about that?
I think of defining self and what do I believe is important for me. I think this pursuit of perfection is partly about competition between me and another for an internship or me and another for a scholarship. And so I'm allowing the other's pursuits to impact what I think is important. And in my work with leaders, I use this phrase a lot. And the phrase is either define yourself, and if you don't, somebody else will define you. And I think that in our society, we allow others to define us if we don't really carefully think about who we are as a person. And I think that pursuit of perfection may be a window into individuals who don't really know who they are, and so they allow societal expectations to define what they should do.
I see a lot of hurting in this, in the sense of you're coming around this common societal idea of what success is, right? You're just looking at what you think you should be pursuing. How many people have you guys talked to in your lives that are somewhere in the middle of college? They realize they're too far in debt-wise to leave. They need to come out of it with a degree, right? That gambler's fallacy. It's never too late to quit. But they come into this and they're just like, why am I actually here? I picked this when I was fresh out of high school, this major, and I'm not sure I want to do it. This is going to lead from, we're talking about where this leads. It goes from college to internships to you get your actual degree to your job, and then that job is the first job of the rest of your jobs in that career field for the rest of your life. And like that's what they're thinking. They've just locked themselves in without consciously choosing to lock themselves in, and it's all because there's this expectation of, in society, this is what I should do. And maybe the word competition doesn't really resonate with a lot of people. I feel like when I see competition, I know what I want my goal to be consciously, and I see other people going for that goal, and I want to reach it better than them or quicker than them. I think maybe comparison might resonate with those who don't resonate with competition.
Yeah.
It's just, I'm looking at other people and they know what career they want, so I should at least have picked a career even if I don't know what it is, so that I'm not falling behind.
Yeah. And so when it comes to that, man, that's like a home run there, right? I think within that too, when we talk about this competition and we talk about this comparison, there's an easy stretch to just jump into overfunctioning as well, and that's got to be a part of perfectionism, right? And so, I mean, you even said it, John, just about defining oneself. So if you're overfunctioning on the end of like success and perfectionism, you're going to underfunction somewhere else. And my guess is that's probably somewhat to self.
Yeah, I think it's out of balance. It can be an out of balance. And, for our listeners that are listening to this is an issue that you have to think through yourself and in your pursuit of excellence. And I go back to the question of, personally, what is it costing you? And, it's not a one size fit all, but the relentless pursuit of perfection time and time again, from my perspective, there's a cost to be borne for that. And the question is that cost worth it to you as a person? And oftentimes what I see is the answer is at some point, no. And that's when, but the question is at that point, what collateral damage has occurred at that point in a person's life when they finally stop and realize, I just can't keep doing this.
Yeah. Yeah. And Ed Friedman talks about that even, and you talked a little bit this too, when it comes to fear. And he talks about how, this drive for perfectionism and success can also lead to a loss of creativity and novel concepts. And because you're just on the wheel. You're just on that wheel and you're doing the same thing other people in front of you are doing. And so in some ways, and we've seen this from loads of different inventors and people who are in charge of companies, like they'll talk about, hey, where did you go to school? And you might have some that go to like Harvard and whatever, but like, Steve Jobs and like they're like in their garage or they're like somewhere else. Now, some of these people are super, super smart, but I'm willing to bet that somewhere down the line, those people have defined themselves somewhere. And when we talk about like definition of himself and trying to figure this out for yourself, this is more than the length of this podcast thought, So I go through this all the time, just thinking, okay, why am I pushing myself this way? Why am I trying to get these next steps? I mean, this is a lifelong journey, and we're going to say that a lot. And so, yeah.
And we're just talking about comparisons here. So I went to Grove City College in Pennsylvania. It's a small conservative Christian college with Presbyterian roots. It's nice and tiny, just over 2,000 students, so it's not big at all. And this whole idea of comparison, like you'll hear some people talk, it has a high prestige and reputation in very small circles in certain places. So it's interesting where people will know of it and have decent acclaim of it, or not know of it at all, and they might know about the outlet malls near it. But this thing went around recently, and it was the U.S. News and World Report recognizes Grove City College's strength as the web result for a quick Google search I did. And the thing that stuck out about it, and I don't know if we hold this with pride or with like a little bit of contempt, but it singled Grove City College out on its A+ schools for B students list. And I just thought that was hilarious. We're not quite good enough to be A students, but we are an A+ school.
It reminds me of this this wonderful show I saw with the world's tallest midget. It was a sight to behold.
Oh, man. So I think it's probably good. I feel like we've covered this perfectionism pretty well. So I'm going to just pose these questions back to you real quick. How can one reduce anxiety in these situations?
Define self.
No. Okay. And then how can one manage the pressure to perform with their values and goals? I think we would say work on your values and goals, because that's more a definition of self. Right. So as far as perfectionism goes, stop doing it. But yeah, I mean, really, it's.
I feel like you just gave me a peanut butter and jelly sandwich when I asked for a steak dinner, with those questions. Oh, it's just all about defining yourself.
Yeah.
It's like, give me something more, but
Sure.
it comes down to
and
that.
we're going to give you the peanut butter and the jelly and the bread, and you have to put it together yourself.
Oh, yeah.
or cut the crust off, however you like it. So, so I believe we do have some shout outs though. And Zach, like always, you're going to call out, I believe our buddy, who are we talking
I
about?
think his name's Jesse Huffsteller. Do you recall what his name is on Spotify?
Is it Jetler?
Yeah, it is Jetler, Jetler. He has a few tracks released. We'll try and remember to put his website in our show notes, which we'll probably forget to, as always. And what was it?
I think John knows I think there's like a little thing we use. It's some sort of limiter.
Rainbows, goldfish.
Yeah, it's called the spiderfish. What's it? Starfish limiter, right?
We're just checking to see if you're with us on this one.
Yeah, technology in me, the MySpace is a little hint, and the auto reverse cassette player from last session that tells you a little bit what my technology level is.
Pretty solid. Well, I think just for our own playfulness here, I think we're just going to ask you more questions like this in the future. Just
great.
Pull yourself into it.
Stay on the balls of your feet.
I will. Yes.
So, so the shout out to Jesse, and we appreciate him helping us out there. You know what? I'm also going to shout out Jason Kuzman, who gave us these wonderful microphones to use this time, and he's going to be our supplier from Audio Technica. So thank you very much, Jason.
Yeah, if you listen very closely to you audiophiles out there, you'll notice we're using 3 different model microphones, and it might be driving you crazy. So that's the test.
Yeah, hypercardioids and regular cardioids.
Dynamic, directional, something.
Sounds great.
I was waiting for John to just say something weird. Okay, so once again, check us out on email. I guess, well, not check us out. I guess you just send us an email at theofpodcast@gmail.com. You can look at us on Facebook and watch us on YouTube. So with that, I am Alex.
I'm John.
And I'm Zach.
And we'll catch you next time.
Bye.
See you later.